welcome back in to another episode of Offensively Accurate with your host, truly, AtlasThugged, whatever other moniker you may know me as. And we're here to give you some of the based Christian takes from a Christian nationalist perspective. Forgive me, I feel a little bit off. I think having a lot of Thanksgiving meals and doing nothing for an extended period of time, also with having the newborn as well. I feel a little off, feel a little relaxed, slow. But I've had a lot more time to actually stream, so I figured I'll get some stuff done for you guys. Especially because there has been people, fans, followers who've asked me to do a bit more on my own solo stuff rather than just only committing to jar openers and doing only jar openers, which I wanted to anyways. Wasn't just because fans were asking for it, but because I wanted to as well. So with that out of the way, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow on X if you haven't already, follow on TikTok if you have my page there as well, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, I should be there. Outside of Google, I think I'm not on Google. I think the RSS feed is a little bummy on Google. So outside of there, but I'm there everywhere else. And I do want to say, again, I do have a new microphone. I believe I had it hooked up wrong even the last episode I did. So if anything sounds off, please let me know. Spam it in the chat. And what's up, Titan? This entire Discord has been insane. Yeah, it's been wild. We're going to start off with that too. I thought it was kind of wild to just see how many voices have come in to give mention to what's going on so far regarding a singular meme that's kind of taken on a whole life of its own. It reminds me of Calendargate, but a lot more hardcore. A good, separation of, what's the word? Dissident right individuals and others fracturing on the right. And what's up, Noticer? I know that you follow me on X. I appreciate that. Yeah, I get it all the time. That's why I started streaming. Maybe do radio and maybe have a career in that. One of the first things I wanted to start off with would just be going directly into where my thoughts are with the Wifejak War. I think to start things off specifically would be how many adjacent accounts on the dissident right. People like Harrison Smith, iHypocrite, and I know you Titan as well. You actually you pointed me out to iHypocrite some time ago, and I followed him on X like a few months ago, and I followed some of what he said as well. I think it's a solid account. What I will say is it's not just them. You have 9mm SMG, although I don't know how much you can call him dissident right. I think he is dissident right, but I guess he's a little bit more traditional than a lot of other people. He's also a little bit older from what I understand too. And that's where we are. We are in a position of a singular meme also causing more fractional issues on the right. And again, like I said earlier, it stems a bit from Calendargate, right? Not stems from it, but it's similar. There are parallels to it. And it shows a very hardcore difference in the value structure that different groups on the right have between one another. Now, specifically, Calendargate was between Christian right-wing values versus more libertarian right-wing values, and the kind of battle that occurred there as well, specifically in regards to women modesty and like selling sex to men and like on those value there. But what we have to start off with is going to be kind of wild because this was Harrison Smith going at Nick Fuentes. Now, it's not often that Nick Fuentes gives any more than a singular reply to try to kind of ratio. And this actually went well into the night. I was up because of my newborn. But we'll start there and I'll go ahead and switch screens over here. Give me 1 second. See if it's, I think it's this one. Yeah, okay. Forgive me, I'm a bit rusty. I haven't been streaming in quite some time, except on jar openers. Now, this was the one that Harrison Smith ended up responding to. And again, Nick Fuentes hardly ever gives a bit more of a reply to just kind of be a little bit edgy or corny sometimes too, to get a ratio on somebody who he thinks has a wrong opinion. And he generally picks on smaller accounts too. But what was curious about this was he went back and forth with Harrison quite a bit. So there's a bit of a dialogue we can go through here. We have Nick Fuentes. He says, how did the online right go from Gamergate and incel core to white knighting for a lesbian Wojak from Reddit? And I think a lot of people might not even know this too. This Wojak that became the Wifejak meme was lifted from a Reddit account who was just like a Redditor. She had lesbian in her bio and she just like drew a picture of herself. So that's where the meme came from. But here's Harrison Smith. And again, to give a bit more context to this thing for those who haven't been paying attention to the Wifejak War, is specifically that what we're witnessing is a meme being perceived to be a branch of feminism, or rather an exemplary piece of men being subservient to their wives, men that this kind of like metaphysical form, not metaphysical, more of a meta form of feminism that exists among the right wing. And in doing so, they kind of react, knee-jerk reaction to seeing these memes of this woman in different scenarios. You know, Andrew Torba kind of had one that was a bit corny and kind of gay. I didn't really care for that one. But a lot of these are like, you know, the wife giving bad directions and things of that nature too. And you can see some of these here. And with this one in particular, right, you know, this is like, I love you and our children. I love you too. Thank you for being mine. You know, I think this is a bit more, what's the word? Like, you wouldn't catch me posting something like this. But it's not something I'm going to like get angry at to the level that the Groypers and that group, and I guess really it is just the Groypers, seeing how a lot of the adjacents have kind of said, hey, no, we're not with you on this. This one was the one I think is a little bit more gay. You know, I don't think that this would be something I'd post either. But again, it's not something that I look at and I go like, I hate this, like, wow. Or like I look at this and I go, wow, feminism. You know, when I look at this image, I don't see a husband who's like, I just get bossed around by my wife. And so my overall take on this was that the Groypers, and really the just Nick Fuentes parroters, but Nick Fuentes kind of perceived this idea that wasn't present in the first place. And so everything he's been saying has been a reaction to that, in which he perceived that I would say never was there at all. Now you could say in the fringe, maybe something like this is a bit corny, but it's not the subservient wife guy kind of beta male stuff that they're so adamantly against. And because it's kind of curious and puzzling, because I myself is someone who's adamantly against like being led by your wife, right? I'm someone who's adamantly against this kind of conservative feminism, if you would put it that way. It's a form of feminism that has seeped so deeply into the behavior of even right-wing females and right-wing more traditional people, who it's gone so deep into a layer that they don't even realize they're being feminist. Forgive me. And what I mean by that is it's like letting the woman lead, letting the woman tell you like yes or no, and not having full authority and full responsibility for the actions inside your relationship. And that can take a bunch of different forms. But again, let me not do a tangent here. And we'll go back to Harrison Smith here. So Harrison Smith says he has a typo, the same reason we as individuals went from being edgy teenagers to responsible family men. What's the point of a political movement in perpetual adolescence? Grow mature, become more powerful. And Fuentes again responds here, edgy humor is a feature of male space, not just adolescence. Wifejak is an unfunny, female-safe meme that represents encroachment. And I'll stop it right there too. For those who have followed in this would know this as well too, even in the early conception that we were seeing of Wifejak online was also being perceived negatively by the kind of rat femmes and the femcells and the more kind of extreme feminists. They viewed it as a men were dumping on women, when really it was, as 9mm SMG put it, was just like an endearing way to kind of exemplify, and husbands could relate to one another, of like, yeah, my wife does that retarded thing too. Forgive me. I had too much Thanksgiving dinner. But again, it falls in line with the fact of, you know, my wife is terrible at giving me directions, or, you know, my wife always says these dumb things when we're watching movies. She's always asking me questions. All these kinds of things that men can relate to that don't exhibit this kind of beta male being led by your wife behavior, in which, you know, they're kind of projecting and attacking something that's not there once again. But to continue with Nick Fuentes, he says the big picture is this retcon that male feminist wife simping is somehow trad or masculine. Feminist attitudes must be completely dismantled. Now, if I was to take something from this, it would be the feminist attitudes must be completely dismantled. So now I'm at a point where I think you have someone in Fuentes, who I've actually agreed with in the past, can't see any other kind of behavior or rhetoric from a female without it coming off as some form of feminism. It's like we've kind of reached the point that a wife or a woman saying anything is bad. You know, it's like the only good position for a female is for her to be completely silent. So we're kind of reaching this like Islamic level of like appreciation for a wife, right? This is more like in the Muslim line of faith, where the only good woman is a woman that shuts up and says nothing. And I think we're falling away, right? We're falling away from the actual kind of Christian roots that once got a lot of individuals to listen to Fuentes in the first place, as those who were people who were tired of seeing the kind of homosexual adjacent, not even homosexual adjacent, homosexual like friendly groups like TPUSA and all of the such. And so it goes on, right? So Harrison Smith responds, "You only think it's unfunny because you have no frame of reference. If you're married, you get it. And if you're not, you don't. Being a faithful husband and father is obviously trad and masculine and comes with universal experiences that the Wifejak meme makes light of. It's the equivalent of my wife does this thing, lol, so does mine. To turn that into some culture war feminist encroachment is nonsense. To launch a countervailing attack against the very concepts of marriage and fatherhood is deeply subversive and counterproductive." And while I will pause it here too, I agree wholeheartedly with what Harrison's saying as well. Although Harrison does, I wouldn't even say skeletons in the closet. There are some kind of tweets that he's put out that I do think kind of border on the thing that Fuentes is actually attacking, which I do think that some of those things, the idea of a man being an extreme simp or a man even being a second in command to his wife, I think those things do need to be attacked. This is kind of the feminism that we're trying to uproot, the feminism that exists even without being, espoused by someone with purple colored hair and multicolored hair and things of that nature. However, a lot of the counter memeing has come at the cost of, I think, many individuals backing out. Now, I will say, I'll put myself back on screen here. You had iHypocrite earlier today saying he's no longer streaming on cozy.tv. Now, cozy.tv is the streaming platform that Nick used while he was being entirely banned off everything. It's something that like Chief Trumpster used, and there's probably other accounts that are in that network of individuals who also use that platform. But iHypocrite, being a massive account, is no longer using it. And you even had other people who were pretty adjacent to the movement as well, being like, that's a big fish to lose, especially from like a business perspective. So they were kind of saying like, we really hope this counter signaling is worth it if we're going to lose people to that level. Forgive me once again. And then you also had, again, Harrison Smith. And if you're not familiar with Harrison Smith is a, I guess, I don't know if it's former now because InfoWars is still alive, but he's an InfoWars co-host, right? He's like, it's essentially Alex Jones, Owen Schroyer, then Harrison Smith. Those are kind of like the three top dogs. I'm probably forgetting one. I think his name's JD Greer. But he's a very well-read individual. He's pretty honest with how dissonant some of his opinions are. I think he's probably maybe the most honed in on the JQ of any of the InfoWars individuals, seeing how Alex Jones has kind of backed away from that position. As someone who calls himself, the tip of the spear, I will always appreciate what Alex Jones has done. But in that actual realm of topic, he's kind of backed away from. But Harrison Smith has been pretty honest about it. Now, he's not went and made it a kind of his very own, narrative and like kind of like made it his prerogative. But he does speak truth to it, especially like in regards when there's actual news stories and again, context of that certain news cycle of the day. And so it continues. And this is where Nick Fuentes is going to bring up some of these Harrison Smith tweets I brought about earlier. And some of them are pretty, like this one in particular. I will say this one, and I'll put it on screen here. So I apologize. Watching your wife give birth is the most amazing thing you will ever witness, especially without an epidural or any pain relief. It's like they go into a trance and revert to a more savage primordial phase. Like your spirit is subsumed by a raw animal focus. You can practically feel the waves of power emanating from her. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. So, in a vacuum, if someone said this to me offline, I probably wouldn't view it in the same light I'm viewing it right now. But to kind of put it online like this is, I'm not going to attack Harrison for feeling that way, because I think when you do witness childbirth, it is something that's of great, it's an experience. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's an experience, and especially for your first time experiencing childbirth and being in that room, it's something that you kind of just like, we've seen the videos. There's all these videos all the time of fathers who pass out because it's just like, what did they just witness? It's like a lot of things going on, a lot of emotions. And again, there's also, it's a bit kind of, it's rough to look at too, especially if it's a natural childbirth and you're in there watching it all happen from start to finish. It's more specifically the line of, You can practically feel the waves of power emanating from her. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. I think that's when it kind of gets to the point of like, okay, like we get it. Like, like I think this whole kind of paragraph is like, okay, we get it. And again, I will say again, if someone said this to me in private and like it was like, my one of my best friends talking this to me, I'd be like, no, like I get it. Yeah, I was there. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say like I'm tearing up just thinking about it. I mean, I if there was something to tear up about, it would be the fact of like I just had my firstborn child. Like that's an experience where it's like a level of emotion where you're like you really don't know what to do with it. So I wouldn't fault someone for saying like, dude, like I feel like I'm gonna cry. Like what do I have in my hands right now? But in the light of this specific conversation and context, that's where I think it kind of becomes a usable device against Harrison Smith because they go, look, this is you posting a paragraph online, kind of like heralding your wife. Now, I think that being a nice and appreciative of your wife is bad. No, but I also don't see much value in doing it online, specifically when women are going to be attacked for any and everything online. And specifically when you're someone like this, I'm somebody who will never post my wife or my daughter without putting like an emoji or something to cover them up because I know how people behave on the internet. Like I would never put them in a situation where they would be able to be used as a tool against me because I think that's kind of irresponsible. But this is just words. Um, and again, I don't think everything is bad here, but again, it does teeter on the kind of what's the word? A little simpy. I guess that's really the only word I can kind of think of. It does come off a bit effeminate. I think these are kind of thoughts best kept inside or offline as well too. Um, maybe I'm probably not giving the best commentary on this specifically, but it does give me that kind of feeling of like it's probably not best to be shared here on X. We have Titan saying, first time seeing that comment, don't use Twitter much. The only thing to tear up about that moment is the very subject of creation and childbirth coming to its apex. Right. And then that's what I was saying, like being, especially with a firstborn child, it's something where it's like, it's such an experience that like, I couldn't blame someone who went through it for like the first time. I think when you're on child 3 and you're having that kind of reaction, it's like, I think you're a little emotional, man. We've already been here, you know what it looks like, that kind of feeling. Um, Maybe outside of the aspect of like there was some kind of like unforeseen or emergency circumstances where they thought they would lose the child and then they somehow save it, like I think, but again that's like very contextual and like very few and far between. And again I think I do agree with you, Titan. Especially being posted like online, I think that kind of takes away a bit from like the genuine appreciation of it when you go to post online and have other people appreciate it with you, even those who've like not gone through it. um but again, not to attack Harrison Smith particularly, I just think it's not yeah, it does go to a point where it's like I really don't know how to feel about it. Yeah, his telling this is definitely a weird tweet regardless, and I do agree. It's just off. It's like it's off-putting, I think. Particularly because like I wouldn't be posting something like that. I also think it's not in a man's place to be overly vulnerable online or in any other circumstance, especially if it's not in the most minute of circumstances of like great loss or great gain. But he goes on to say it clearly is an attack on family. That's why everyone thinks it's weird. My posts about loving my wife don't actually have anything to do with it. Stop launching counterproductive campaigns and you want us to pretend like that's not what you're doing. And Nick says it has everything to do with it. That's the whole point. There are plenty of fathers who, like me, cringe when they read your post saying, I tear up thinking about the power emanating from my wife. And I think that's the part where I would agree with. Right? Like I would agree in that specific context with that, I agree. But you are so henpecked you don't see it. It's Thanksgiving, go cuddle Wifejak. Which again, this goes back to him attacking him for his wife. Like, if you have a wife, right, like it's like, wow, you should never cuddle your wife. That's the more masculine thing to do. Like, who touches their wife? And then it's like, again, it kind of confuses me of like, what signal are we sending here? Like, what is the actual kind of prerogative here? Because I thought at first it was dismantling feminine attitudes, but then this comes off as like an attack on a way to carry your relationship with the family, particularly when we have the white race being under attack. I think any and all efforts to build white families should be the main and primary focus priority. And so he says, LOL, who gives a shit if you cringe? I actually want young men to get married and have families. You are counter signaling that. You say that you're not because it's obviously a bad thing to do, but you are. He says, instead of arguing the actual point, you are just insisting that my position is something other than what I have said. You have to lie because since we both agree that men should get married, you'd have to defend losing to your wife at Mario Kart or crying in awe of her power. And again, I can't really defend Harrison here because he kind of put these things out in the open himself. But again, I'll go back to what I said originally. I think that this meme, this Wifejak, became something that they were attacking because they perceived something that wasn't there, which is why it's caused all of these more adjacent accounts that have kind of saw it for what it is, to be like, we don't understand why you're attacking it, and now you're attacking it so far to the point that, and again, to be as family, not family friendly, but to be as like YouTube friendly as possible, there's been some extremely kind of disturbing images that have been posted to counter meme that. And I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and be offended, like, wow, I can't believe that picture online. Like, that's really bad. Although, when it creeps into the realm of child sexuality and things of that nature, that's when it's like, okay, like, it's going like pretty far here. Like, we're doing a lot of effort to kind of attack at the idea, when I think this could have been rather resolved, maybe in a debate, rather than take over the internet in such a degree as it has. But again, it's the right wing, and fighting is our number one skill, like level 99 in fighting. Tate says, yeah, like doing that type of stuff online feels feminine, like they want attention for their emotions. Social media has crippled many in so many different ways. And I think you're right. Like, I agree, because I'm not going to be someone who's going to post anything like I specifically have a post about my wife where it's like, I think I have like an emoji over her face, but I posted it in an effort to be like, marriage and dating is not something you should give up on. I was doing it in a way to be like, to encourage other men to do the same thing. It wasn't an emotional thing of like, oh, this is just how me, and I'm so grateful and all these things. It was more like, I understand that the majority of women that exist on this planet have been deeply uprooted by feminism. And I know it's very easy to sit here and go, I think they're all garbage, but I promise you there are still few and far between. And I think even if the slightest chance is a 1% chance, it's worth spending your time trying to pursue that than it would be to give up entirely and black pill out on the entire issue, especially when you do want to look at things like our heritage and our ethnicity is really like under attack, 6 ways from Sunday. And so it dies off here too. Harrison Smith said some other things as well, but they went back and forth for quite a while. And I think most people who know Fuentes and how he kind of interacts with different accounts online will know and say like, yeah, it's pretty rare that he goes this back and forth with somebody, unless it's like Laura Loomer. But you can see obviously Fuentes is like ratioing Harrison on all of these, and I'm not sure what the difference in following is. Yeah, about 4 times the same amount. So if you were to multiply that, he'd still probably be getting ratioed a little bit. But again, this was one of those moments where it's not Nick himself, but it's more like seeing the like what do you call themselves, like the Groyper generals, and what's the word? All the Groypers themselves, really, and some of the memes of the lengths they've went to. And I'll give you an example too. And so hopefully YouTube doesn't get angry about this. But if I go to 9mm SMG, he's kind of highlighted this quite a bit. He's been going hard at it too, because I think it's just one of those things where it just doesn't make any sense the degree they go to. And so this one here. And so he says, we don't like dudes who loathe heterosexual relationships. Worship a man, idolatry. The motto in many Groyper profiles is, and I won't say that, grape, kill, die for Nick Fuentes. And that's like their motto, they say. It says, make pedo jokes regarding even a cartoon little girl that's clearly a young child pregnant in a child's room. He said, it's not about the meme, we just think you're sick. Notice a pattern? And so I don't think he posted it on this one. Maybe he got rid of it. I might be on the wrong one, actually. Let me go back. I think, yeah, it's this one. He says, totally normal behavior, right? Well, it is to some, sadly. And so this is one of the, I wouldn't even say it's one of the worst ones I've seen. Most of them have been like just violent. Some of the ones that have been posted, like with like tying the Wifejak up, doing different things to the Wifejak that I won't say because I know YouTube is just waiting to give me a strike because I talk too openly about stuff like this. But this is what I think is giving such a bad perception. and it doesn't get the point across. It just pulls people away from the movement of what Nick Fuentes was doing, which is why I don't understand it at all. The counter signaling, period. Um, and again, a lot of the rhetoric, and I think it was for me specifically, and I'll be honest with you, I think specifically it was one of the clips that was floating around on X was one of a super chatter who had messaged into Nick and said, "Hey, like I'm gonna like miss the show or something." It was something along these lines of like, "Hey, I'm gonna miss the show," or like, "Hey, I just came back. I missed like the last 30 minutes. I was with my wife and kids doing this." And then Nick proceeds to just air out and like and just really call this guy like what's wrong with society. He called him like worse than trans people. And that's when it's kind of like I as someone who's agreed with Nick in the past, and everyone who follows me know this, like I think Nick also has good points, particularly regarding Israel and the politics and the geopolitical realm. I just don't get it. I really don't get it. It makes me think that it just does come from a position of hating anything that could be slightly positive towards women or family in general. But I don't, he even in his own words a couple months ago, he said the opposite of this, right? He said things of like we gotta we gotta be fake cells so our grandchildren can be incels, something like that. And promoting building families and towards marriage values. But it kind of crosses these lines where I can't take it in a genuine position anymore. And I've already been getting attacked on different things. I've replied on X from different groypers who have said like things like call me like a mouth breather and such. And it's like, my first thought is like, I would mock any single one of you if you were to actually post anything online, but I try not to think that selfishly or that arrogantly. It just, it's very confusing. But again, I would point back to the fact that having all these other adjacent accounts kind of say, hey, we're not supporting this anymore. And I even have it. I have the actual specific tweet here, and I can go ahead and pull it up. This is from iHypocrite, and I think Titan, you're the one who actually pointed him out to me. And I started following after this. This is a guy who has said not streaming on Cozy anymore. This animosity towards family life is a deal breaker for me. And maybe I'm not doing enough justice by pointing out all the different like dissident accounts who have posted some pretty aggressive stuff regarding it. But when you get somebody like this to kind of go away from it, I think it calls into question that even the guys who are normally attuned to the very edgy humor that exists on these platforms, and how aggressive people can go, but then also say, hey, I can't support this anymore. It's like, that's when it's like, okay, maybe we need to like dial it back and maybe get a better understanding of like what the actual ideals we want to be pushing are. Because if you want me to be honest, I think this is the easiest way you could sit there and go, I mean, Nick is a homosexual, right? It's like, it's hard to view it as that, right? And I think that kind of that trope of, nobody hates women more than homosexual men. And I think that kind of fits into that trope, and it's rather unfortunate. But again, it's kind of to be expected when you get the right wing as it is in its current form, when you have people like Donald Trump who have united them. And I will say this too, this is something I've been saying is going to happen for quite some time, because we all kind of locked arms around Trump. It's like, get Trump in, even no matter how different us on the right and libertarians may have our value systems, it's like anything but the left. But now that Trump is in, it's like anything is fair game. It's like we did our part, right? It's like everyone who's like in these small groups is like, we did our part, and they're going to go back to their niches where they can actually kind of push the actual values that they want to see, no matter how critically opposed they may be to the general populace of who actually voted for Donald Trump in the first place. And so I see it carrying on for a few more days, specifically with so many bigger accounts getting involved. And again, iHypocrite was like a VIP member who went to like the AFPAC or AFPAC 4 or something like that, right? It might be AFPAC 3 or 4. I can't remember. Forgive me. I'm kind of an idiot when it comes to remembering dates and times. But that's kind of the update we have here on the Wifejak Wars, is that it's kind of reached upward, and it's grabbed some of these other bigger accounts who have said, hey, I no longer want to kind of be behind this, seeing just kind of how aggressive it is. And we all know Stone Tossers, right? I'll put the comic back on screen. Stone Tossers is a pretty good. They make pretty phenomenal comics. I was about to say comic books. They make pretty good comics and like memes of such. But this is the general perception anyone who's not terminally online is getting from this, which is seeing a wife, husband, and kids enjoying something that's pretty standard or normal, and then being displeased by it. And so I guess maybe it would be more beneficial to have Fuentes maybe debate someone on this and kind of air out specifically the actual bullet point grievances that they have, because most of these wife jack memes were just like, "Oh, honey, I found a restaurant. It's only about 10 miles away." And he's like, "Okay, that's great. Well, what are the directions?" And she's like, "Okay, take a U-turn in 2 miles." And it's like stuff like that where it's like, that's what a woman is. And I'll revert to Aristophanes, and I probably said it better on my post, but I'll wait to find it later on. I revert to what Aristophanes says, which it seems to be that this is a fundamental inability to love women as they were created, which is they're kind of retarded. We say that lovingly. They were created to be led by men who had iron willpower, convictions, beliefs, and leadership capabilities. They were designed that way. And I think wanting anything outside of that, save for the feminism being non-existent, is you're really just wanting a lesser man to be by your side, right? You're wanting somebody who can think identically to you. You're wanting somebody who won't say anything at all to you that would be slightly out of place, that could halfway annoy you. And it's like, I just don't think that that's how it works or how it was ever to work. I mean, you think about the very first story of the Bible, right? Like the issue that Adam had was that he listened to his wife. So she did something dumb and he listened to her. Now to say that concurs and is a proof that Nick's right here is like, no. I think that's more so the fact of like, there's retarded moments where it's like, okay, it's like, haha, funny. And there's other retarded moments where it's like, dude, what did you just do? Did you seriously just spend $3,000 on this credit card? And those are the ones where it's like, we want to get rid of those, not the ones that are more naturally in tune with their like actual biology and who they are. So that is where we are at with the Wifejak War. I wanted to give an update to that too. And again, it's wild because that took 30 minutes to cover the update there, but I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. Just seeing how so much of the online right is attacking it and moving with it. And again, yeah, I don't know, Titan. I don't think you use X that much at all, but that's essentially what it is. People have been making these tweets where it's like my timeline right now, and it's like Wifejak, 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 Wifejak. OnlyFans thought Wifejak, 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 Wifejak. Crazy video where some random Indian does something. Wifejak, Wifejak, Wifejak. And it's like, yeah, that's how it is, right? That's how it operates. That's how the For You page does. It's kind of rage bait inclined. That's how all social media is. Anything that can get engagement will always get the nod over anything else, which is why rage bait content always is king on these platforms. If you can get someone who can comment multiple times in a post, well, yeah, it's gonna boost it in the algorithm, because it's like, this is something that's definitely wanted to be seen by other people, and it's rather unfortunate it exists that way. Also, thank you very much for the super chat, Titan. I appreciate you very much, dog. He says, these men had true men robbed from them, so I think that's why they struggle accepting what they are. And that's true, And to be quite honest as well, it's like a negative, what's that word called? It's a two negative feedback cycle, right? Where you get men, and once again, I appreciate the super chat. Thank you very much. Once again, you have not only are women kind of the girl boss and becoming this kind of this thing, this creation that was artificially designed, by the forces that be, as well as the natural circumstances that have come environmentally from them, to be things that men don't desire, or will then begin to have lesser than great relationships or perceptions of them. You also have men who then in turn go, none of these women are worth it. What's the point of even trying? Why would I bother getting a job? Why would I bother going to the gym? Why would I bother? And so they kind of like feed back into each other. I would be curious to hear someone give the chicken before the egg story. I do think that I probably couldn't give the best answer or a correct one, rather. But it does kind of, it's not to say the blame's on both sides, but again, you know me, I'm someone who would sit here and still say, I think there's an imbalance in the force. I think that women do have self-agency. We live in a liberal society, and they do make decisions on their own. People don't force them to. So I do think it's a lot more of a 60%, 40% issue, where a lot more women are driving some of these societal issues than they are men. And again, we had the last presidential candidate run on a campaign that was specifically like, what if we, I don't know, do abortion everywhere? And people were like, I'm voting for Kamala because of women's health care. And we saw a lot of these very single issue people. Now, although she didn't win on running on that single issue, there was a large base of her, of Kamala's, that was violent in the aftermath and sending threats online and just like going insane. The 4B movement as well, all because we were going to take away their ability to kill their children with abortion. It's unfortunate, and they're always out of it, which is why I think the main number one concern would be to restoring the church to its original strength. If we can even get it to its original strength, if we can just get it from not being such a sad, pathetic, trampled upon, weak establishment, we'll probably start to see improvement. You know, this kind of goes in line with the fact that we even have there's more men that are religious now than there are females, which is like a big change in the tide compared to previous, the last few decades. And that's why I'm someone who is very strong proponent of Christian nationalism. When it comes from people like Stephen Wolfe, Stone Choir is another good group, good podcast to listen to, as well as the individuals like Joel Webben is a good source. But also why I think people like Andrew Wilson are super spot on with the way that they respond in debate and just shed so much light on the issues that are at B. And again, this goes to another side tangent I won't go too deep on, but a good portion of like why I've moved to a spot where I want to go to orthodoxy over Protestantism is because of the continual visible weakness from Protestantism, the lack of having an actual kind of church authority structure, which leaves up problems of exegesis, and I probably can't say that right, exegesis. I don't think I can say that word right. Which is how you get all these different branches, all these different denominations. The I love Jesus is my boyfriend music, all these things that have become this extremely watered down version of what it is, which gives you the ideals and the thoughts of, if Jesus were here today, dude, like they'd be like, whoa, dude, like you're not a Christian. They're looking at Jesus, they're like, you're not a Christian. How dare you talk to people like that? And it's like we've lost the values. We've sacrificed Christianity on an altar, and put multiculturalism, the Babel agenda, and just be nice, vague version of that, in its throne. I think it's super unfortunate. And I think and specifically, I think the Nala aspect, the Nala porn star, and seeing how a lot of the online Protestants reacted to that was one of the things that made me go, hey, I don't think I can stay in Protestantism anymore if the online Protestants are acting and responding in such a way that is so obviously incorrect. I mean, even like intuitively and in a gut feeling, like very incorrect, right? It's like this woman should be spending time in repentance and like out of the spotlight. But you have people like Michael Knowles who come on, and I think he's even a Catholic too. But he comes on and he's like, wow, this is this is very genuine. You should go sell Jesus Loves Me shirts like on the street. Like that's great. It's like, nah. Most of those in Orthodoxy would point to the standard of you need to go spend a lot of time, living a Christian life and at least attempting to live a more Christian life and reflecting on all the poor decisions you made leading up to that. Also, what is up, Kukla? We appreciate having you in here. And again, I appreciate the super chat, Titan. You've been my top dog in that aspect. To move on though, we'll do a hard segue off of the more cultural stuff. We'll move into something a bit more easy to talk about. That's not so offensive to the average individual. And this would be the fact that AOC is looking like she is going to be the front runner for 2028. Now we have a lot of news that broke earlier today and throughout the day, pointing to this. I have a good bit of this group together, so go ahead and kind of pick at it one by one. And so I'll go ahead and put it on screen here. This is from Scott Greer, who I think I don't think he's the InfoWars guy. I think I'm mixing him up with JD Greer. I think they have similar names. So, but forgive me. He says, "Don't laugh at this prospect. Most of the field will be running its apparent moderates. There will be a huge opening for someone to run in the Bernie Sanders lane. AOC could be a serious contender, and I think the AOC will be a serious contender. And a bit more kind of speaks to that the later we go on, and a few more posts here. I always thought this was a possibility. I think if you were to think of who's the Democrat that has the most name brand value outside of like Gavin Newsom, it's AOC. I think you can't really even point to anybody outside that's not in the elite category with like the Bernie and Hillary Clinton and so on, like the Obamas. But like that next tier down, who could be an up and comer, it would definitely be AOC. And you go back a bit. Google says, just popped in when I heard Aaron say this. Congratulations, so happy for your enlightenment path. We don't evangelize in orthodoxy. It's all about the NOUS and heart. Yeah, I again, and not spend too much time on it. Just go back to the AOC thing, but I'm glad you're in here, Kukla, because you've been one of the people who actually kind of pointed me on this path to begin with, pointing me to people like Jay Dyer, um, and a few others who I began to kind of familiarize myself with. And I will be as honest as I can be. This, I in my gut, listening to a specific debate regarding, leaning on your own understanding versus leaning on the church, who even had the Bible in that first 300 years before it was written, a lot of those kind of arguments spoke to me to being like, one of them feels a lot more correct than the other. And even just like on a very gut level, on like I don't even have any information in front of me, but just what I've came to know anecdotally, orthodoxy is very prevailing in what I've become to actually kind of point my idea in, or my path to. And so I'm probably going to be starting fresh once again. I'm going to be like a newbie in orthodoxy, and I'm no theologian. I'm no pastor. I'm somebody who just tries to give a good bit of, advice and speak, as much truth as I possibly can to the issue as a layman. Tate says, interesting, my comments don't pop up anymore. And I apologize for that. Titan, if you actually put like different asterisks in between words and such, that might help as well too. I had Donnie Brooks in here pretty often too. He actually messaged me off air one time, that he had like a string of messages that wouldn't show up in my chat, and I'm not sure why. I do know I have multiple strikes on my channel, so I'm not strikes, but I got a strike and I have multiple warnings on my channel. So they're probably watching my chat box like a hawk. But you can do whatever you can to like put asterisk and weird things in between, so it has a harder time recognizing it, because I think it's an automatic system that's picking it up. But to go back to the AOC, I've always felt this was going to happen. I think that she would be able to run as a populist. I think that she is someone who's even a bit more to the right of Kamala Harris. And, I think everyone's to the right of Kamala Harris. But so she'll be able to run a better campaign, I think, from just a policy standpoint. I think she's someone who's not going to have a hard time, giving, thoughtful responses to questions. I don't think she'll have to dance and do some kind of like crazy flipping around to, kind of speak. So I see her performing much better in the campaign aspect. And so Tantan says, maybe commenting too much. I don't think so. I don't have any kind of thing set up on my channel. So you should be fine on that aspect. Like I always put like instead of all the vowels, I'll put like an asterisk or some kind of like random like letter just to like throw off, because it might be a specific term. I know one of them was about capital punishment that Donnie Brook wasn't able to get his comments through for. That guy. No, Kugli, you're totally fine. She says, I'm a cradle orthodox. It's in my birth and don't know anything even to this day, Aaron. So it's all good. A very deep faith. So I don't want to digress, but another topic to AOC. I heard John Fetterman is, and maybe a contender, believe it or not. And I did see that as well. I think, again, he's somebody who's also in that B tier, who could be an up and comer. I know, I think we would be looking at probably most likely, we're going to get Josh Shapiro, John Fetterman, Gavin Newsom, Kamala, again, most likely, AOC, and there's like that, his name is like JP Kershowitz or something like that, who I'm like not familiar with at all, and I probably said his name completely wrong. So they have a big field to like pull from. But I think AOC would dominate that. I haven't seen any kind of snap polling that speaks to that though, but it seems that the internet believes that she would probably be a more dominant figure in the race compared to Kamala, which I think is kind of funny because, if Kamala were to lose, what's the word? If she loses another primary to everyone else when she was like supposed to be the presidential candidate this year, it's like, that's history for you. Maybe she finds it too politically unviable to do it and then relegates herself back to a more, governor of California or something like that, and she kind of just fades out she just fades out of the national picture. Now, Colin Rugg had a report, which I'll go to that here. If it'll work and load. So this is the Colin Rugg report here. This is from more about AOC, and he says AOC could run for president in 2028, according to The Hill. One Democrat strategist said their party is impressed with AOC's ability to cut through the BS and tell it like it is. And I think, okay, I think she's a better speaker than Kamala. I think that's that for one. And I think that's the actual kind of shining moment for her is that she'll not have to struggle like Kamala Harris. I think AOC would be somebody who would go to Joe Rogan and not be afraid to go deeper onto subjects. Now, she'd probably be getting proved wrong, but I think that she would be able to retaliate in a way that wouldn't damage her brand as badly as would for Kamala. The other quote here says she's somebody, oh yeah, I just read that one, forgive me. The Democrats believe the Congresswoman has a unique ability to connect with young voters. This, they believe, would allow her to utilize social media and podcasts to help win the election. And again, like what I just said before I even read that, that's where I think that you had Kamala fail, right? Was the inability to go on the platforms and answer in like long form, and it not come off extremely scripted, fake, artificial, teleprompter readings, all of things in that light, I think is what helped Kamala lose. And it was still a lot closer than like I think what people would have liked to believe. And that maybe even be outside the fact of, was there any more fortifying of the election like what occurred in 2020, and playing on what that article said. And, so people have been posting a lot of different quotes from her, especially some of the ones that are from like earlier, a few years ago, talking about how she had goals to run at some point in 2028, which we'll get to that one with Matt Gaetz. And make sure I can put my headphones in before we get to that one. And so, Aka here has another corresponding one, which says, new leaks indicate that the DNC is putting all their eggs into the AOC basket for the 2028 primary. They feel that she's the future of the Democratic Party and gives them the best chance to win. And again, Kukla says, hate to say it, but you're right, Aaron. She can at least string a sentence a little better, but barely. And I agree. I think that they would dump Kamala Harris in a heartbeat. We saw what they did to Joe Biden with regards to what Kamala did to him and that kind of dump off there. I think the same thing is true here. I think that they'll easily dump Kamala out completely. You had your chance, Kamala, but you didn't come up. You came up short one more time. And then alone at that, like she was never even actually kind of like elected. She was appointed. They kind of went around the democratic process to get Kamala installed. And so, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna make sure I can plug my headphones in first. It's actually off screen, so you probably can't see what I'm doing here. But just to make sure that I listen to this video, I know I'm listening to the right thing, or if I know that it's going to get me banned, I'll know to quit. There we go. Okay, perfect. So now that we're connected here, it's not this one, but it's going to be one of these coming up from Matt Gaetz, I believe. We're going to take a listen to. And so Sophonis had a good quote, and I think he's a phenomenal follow. On X, if you actually use X as much as I do, it's actually kind of probably unhealthy how much I use X. But then you have Vance versus AOC would feel like Tumblr versus 4chan all over again. And that would be funny because I think that's kind of the vibes that both of these individuals give off. Is one is the edgy, very statistically supported, he'll get called weird and whatnot with JD, but he's probably right most of the time. And then with Tumblr, you get the feel good. You get it's very pretty to look at. It's the more artistic and falls in line with the more traditional liberal values. Not traditional, really, but more progressive and what we've come to understand as the current populist left wing. But this is from Matt Gaetz. We'll go to this next one here. Let me go ahead and make sure I start taking these tabs out so I don't cause my computer to go up in flames. But this is from Matt Gaetz, former Congressman Matt Gaetz, who, again, I believe a lot of people believe that they had a relationship together. But again, allegedly just a rumor. I'm not entirely sure. But Alex has told people she's running in 2028 since 2019. So he kind of puts his kind of weight behind it to say, hey, he's been around her quite a bit, especially being in Congress in the 118th Congress with her, that he thinks this is more than just more than just a thoughtful A/B test, but more so that like there's probably a lot more weight behind this story than what we're seeing. And it's kind of unfortunate to see that we're going to get I mean, not unfortunate, but rather kind of it's to be expected. The Democrats are going to be starting their machine as early as humanly possible to make sure they can win next time. And I think they'll have the best chance the next time around, because obviously Trump won't be able to run for a third term. The Republicans are going to have to figure out how to encapsulate the mega energy into a candidate that's not the one who started the party. So I think we're in for a tumultuous period. A lot more infighting, which is why I've been speaking to that too, pointing out the social and cultural issues. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. I've not been the best or most liking or loving supporter of JD Vance. I think he's somebody who's a bit weak on a lot of different aspects. But I think he does have an ability to speak well. And so I think that they are kind of good matches for each other, being, better speakers and less of the kind of jarring cultural phenomenons that Kamala and Donald Trump are. And Kugler says if JD runs, though, he'll totally decimate her. And I think that's what we would get, specifically like what you got in the Tim Walz debate. I think they would both be a bit more toned back, is probably the better way to say what I just said. They'd be less likely to go at each other's throats for things like put them in jail, things of that nature that get the audience's attention, and they're like, "Ooh, roasted." JD Vance would probably do a nice dance around AOC, just like he did Tim Walz when it came to anything kind of policy related. And I think that's good. I think that's what people are kind of desperate for, are things to be healing in the right direction. And so, I don't think that you can run on immigration in 2028 if we get past a period and get the promises done from this Trump administration. And then we even begin to see maybe positive effects of that before it's time for the next presidency. I don't think people are going to go back to dropping the wall and doing all that kind of progressive, we love all people, all from all cultural backgrounds. I think that era is kind of over. And forgive me, I'm sorry. Man, I'm having a hard time talking. I think I had too much turkey. And we're going to get to some of this more of the news of the day. Seeing how I just wanted to cover some of these two major topics, being the Wifejak and AOC running for 2028. I don't think many people have too many thoughts to that, because I don't think it's altogether shocking by any means, because I think it was to be expected. Maybe like me, I think most people kind of imagined this would happen at some point. I'm more curious how the primaries turn out, because I think the hardest thing for myself and maybe most right wingers is viewing into to dissect the leftist mind outside of like what they hate. So when it's kind of like, what are they going to pick in a cult of nothing, right? Cult of current thing. When it goes between like Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris and AOC and like that kind of bench that they have on the left, who will come out of that primary successfully? I would put my money on AOC. But who am I? Yeah, I'm just some guy who complains on the internet. But I would suspect it, and I'd put my money on that. Not literally, but I would. That's the bet I would make. Would be AOC would come out of that primary, probably by a good margin too. Forgive me. And if anything, I think Kamala would probably be right behind her, especially if they kind of damp or clamp down on the anti-whiteness stuff. They damp down or clamp down. Forgive me, I said that twice. On the kind of critical theory aspect of them, that huge multiculturalism. And maybe it becomes a lot more of the party of whites versus party of blacks and anyone not white. Maybe we see more of that. It would be unfortunate, because I think that would kind of drive us societally to an area where we have now divided the values of people between two different races, or at least the perceived values and what you should value, to two different areas, to two different races rather. And I think that has some pretty rough implications, specifically when you do have a lot of people on the right who are like, we want the white, whites are a global minority. We would like to not be constantly hammered at with all this kind of very subversive messaging that attacks the ideas of like wanting to be inside your own race and like wanting to preserve and just be around white people. And so, I think that could take a pretty rough direction, although it's like, it's not like it's already, it's been positive or rainbow and sunshine since. It's, I can just foresee it getting worse. So hopefully we can do a good enough cleanup job while Trump is in office, and we can get people underneath him who have a lot more Christian values to carry the flag a lot further. Similar to like in the Mel Gibson movie with the Patriot, where he takes the flag from the guy and he's like, if you're not going to do this, I will. Hopefully we get a good bit of that and we can see some more positive results that stem from that. And then Kugler says, I agree 100% on your JD view. He can speak well, but I think he has a fair weather loyalty to the party. And I agree. This is one thing where, like, he's an adult, right? He's an adult. I'm an adult. And I'm like young by any means. Well, I mean, like I'm old by any means. But I don't think someone who has a strong value core set goes from he's literally Hitler to, hey, I'll be your vice president. I unless you're like kind of dumb. Like maybe this guy was reading The Hill and listening to Rachel Maddow, and he was like, "Yeah, Trump is literally Hitler." And then one day somebody showed him like, "Hey, that stuff they're saying about Trump like just really doesn't line up or add up." And he was like, "Wow, I was wrong. I'll be this guy's vice president." I think there's some. To me, it's very puzzling. I probably never will be and never have been a true fan of JD Vance, so I'll kind of hold my peace when it comes to the primaries and that coming up. But by no means do I want somebody like Vivek to get in there either. Vivek's been on a nonstop campaign of being super pro homosexuality and like liberalism stuff, and it's like, dude, you are also extremely subversive. Like, I don't have no problem with Vivek on a personal level. It's more so like, if you would like to run on these issues and make these values like your number one things and priorities, it's like, go to the Libertarian Party. Don't come here and annihilate the platform of the Republicans. I mean, it's already pretty bad. It's in the trash. But don't kind of like finish it off and turn us into like, libertarian light, I guess. Because I don't like the way that that's going to fall away too, especially when he's such a good speaker. But he's somebody who I could see overtaking JD Vance. I think he has a lot more kind of sway with even people who are moderates and leftists. But again, time will tell. We're pretty good far a bit away from that. And so much can happen in such a short period of time in these news cycles that like it's kind of like mind-boggling to think. And then, maybe all of these candidates I listed here all of a sudden kind of fade into obscurity come 2028 when there's like new players that came onto the field in like 2026, or this one billionaire like sort of doing this and now he's in the field. There's so much can change that it's like, who am I to really give any kind of concrete advice without looking just only a little bit into the past? But if we get some into the news of the day, we'll get to some more like kind of one-off, more exciting things, and we'll cover them pretty shortly and pretty quickly. One of the first things here, if I can switch my screen, man, was that there were mysterious lights that were reported over the Capitol Hill, UFOs. And so it's a picture here, but this is from Raws Alerts, and it says there was a UFO, a apparent UFO, was spotted hovering above Capitol Hill this week, sparking concerns that extraterrestrials might be plotting a coup. I wouldn't say anything about the intentions, but I think that's pretty funny. This is a viral snapshot and video, so we'll go ahead and play it. I don't think there's any sound to it. Maybe there is. We'll go ahead and take a listen here. Yeah, I don't think there's any sound here. But it does seem odd. I believe there was also another point in human history where there was also some kind of UFO spotted near the Capitol building. Or I could be mixing that up with like an NYC court building or municipal building. And so if we pause it here, I'll make this full screen as well. This is a snapshot that was taken that showed them kind of in unison. But again, this also seems like it could just be a bunch of drones. Like maybe if there are some bigger drones with lights attached to them, it's going to be harder to tell the difference, especially when we're using, like VHS quality camera footage. But 2.2 million views, no community note on it yet. It's only about 24 hours old at this point. I'd have figured maybe somebody would have had an explanation by now if it was so easily provable fake, but I think we'll probably have a better explanation in the coming days. But just something to think about, especially when we had the Project Bluebeam link and all the things that have been pointed to things such as like the Nephilim. And there'd be, and Tucker Carlson's kind of went on this tangent as well of like the battle of good versus evil. He believes there's a lot more spirits and, forces at work that we just kind of perceive as aliens and being these kind of foreign entities when really they're of Earth. They just have a much more kind of supernatural appearance. Very curious though, but again, I'm not going to fall for the fall for the psyop of like, worrying about this, but it does go in line with one of the guys who had the not a guy, it was a website that did all of the predictions that predicted that the end of the world would happen. After Joe Rogan had an interview with Donald Trump and he'd be president, like all these things kind of line up. You can find that online on a short somewhere. But they like ran all these kind of crazy different prediction models, and that was one that it had or predicted that was deemed to be like the most accurate of what it had produced or the output. And so it is curious, right? It gave like a date of like December 20th. There'd be like a battle in the sky of UFOs, and even UFOs would be fighting UFOs, and like this kind of just like crazy thing. But it also predicted a bunch of other stuff as well, such as Donald Trump and Joe Rogan. But I don't think that's pretty hard to say. When the podcast is as viral as it is, and they're both kind of very popular celebrities. I didn't actually vet this video, hoping there's no sound in it. But I wanted to highlight this too because I think this goes in line, and people might have seen it as well. There was a viral Jared Taylor video that had appeared on. It might have been X that originated on, maybe other platforms too. But people who aren't familiar, Jared Taylor is people will call him a white supremacist, but he's much more of a white nationalist. And it's a lot of these kind of banned people, right? Like obviously Nick Fuentes came back onto the scene. But now you have David Duke. We have Jared Taylor and a few others that have come back onto the scene who were originally these banned people, right? Like you can't listen to these people; their ideas are dangerous. And now you have X being this super free speech app. Although there's caveats in there too, depending on what specific aspect you talk about. And I think Jake Shields is doing a wonderful service by platforming as many of these people he can find who have been bumped off of a bunch of these platforms. And he was somebody who even had Dan Blazerian on his show with Royce White, who was he ran in Minneapolis. I can't remember what position he ran for. Royce White is the guy who turned down an NBA contract because they wouldn't, something to do with like mental health issues. And ever since then, he's kind of taken on this very anti-Fed, like anti the Federal Reserve kind of stance. He was very, very shadow banned and blackballed from different things. He's a very intelligent guy, but him and Dan Blazerian went kind of back and forth over, is it the globalists or is it the JQ, right? Is it like, who is it that, who is the real mastermind behind these things? They had a pretty good conversation. So just to give a shout out to Jake Shields for doing this. And I will say, I wanted to go ahead and play this here, but this is, you said, I was told David Duke is a monster and not to talk to him. He's banned from all social media, including X, the free speech app. I decided to sit down and hear what he has to say. And House Leotardo says Senate. Yeah, I knew he was running in Minnesota, but Minnesota's like extremely blue. Minnesota's like that heavy population of Somalians. That's where Ilhan Omar is at. And so they kind of have like a death grip on a lot of those different districts over there, just based on how the ethnicities kind of break up and the demographics are. But thank you for correcting me, because I actually could not remember it all. And I will say this isn't an endorsement, but I'm just going to kind of play this to show you that Jake Shields is, doing, he's doing his part. He's doing a good bit to actually kind of ensure that the most edgiest of edge of free speech stays alive, whether he agrees with it or not. He wants it to be what it is, described as in the First Amendment. And a lot of people, agree with it, and then they hear something they disagree with, and they go, yeah, but I think this person should be banned. And it's like, okay, well, I don't think you really believe in, freedom of speech. But again, we'll go ahead and play this out. And again, I didn't vet it, so I hope the sound, there's no music to it. So we'll see.
The truth is, I believe in human rights.
Yeah.
And that's how I define myself. I used to call myself perhaps sometimes a white nationalist or a white activist. But I believe in human rights, and I think every people in the world are allowed and should be allowed to have their own societies, their countries, and have it in cognizance and in harmony with their heritage, their traditions, their values.
I appreciate that, Kukla. I'm telling you, YouTube has it out for me, so don't feel too bad. YouTube cannot stand me. I do too well at guiding around the edges, But I appreciate the effort very much. Thank you, and don't feel inclined to either. I one day I'll make it and I'll be able to make money off ads. But back to the video.
People.
Yeah.
And I believe that, by the way, for Palestinians. My whole life I've been sympathy for the Palestinian people.
Agree 100% on that.
And every, whether it be
some
liberal,
racist, but you clearly like felt for those people.
yeah, every decent person, I think, and including liberals or conservative, whatever you want to call them, believes that Palestinians should have a right to have their own nation and preserve that nation and not have it be invaded or changed demographically by people who don't like them. And the reason why we don't get this message is because the media is so controlled by the same group, Zionist group. I mean, a good example is the 6 biggest media corporations in the world. 5 biggest, are AT&T under Stanky, who's a Zionist, and we can keep going. Comcast, which is the MSNBC, and all those things. That's by another Jew by the name of Roberts, but his real name is Mirtsky, right? His ancestry. We got Google, controls 80% of the search engines on planet Earth.
And so obviously it revolves around the same topic that people don't appreciate being spoken about in any regards. And Kukla, I did see that. Let me put it in the chat. I do have an email. So if you ever want to send me anything, guys, whoever's here, related to the show, whether it's in the Discord or not. Oh, my bad. It's actually AtlasThugged 0 is my YouTube one. It's like my business one as well. So if you have anything you want me to send me, like any like big topics or like big links or anything like that, feel free to send it to me there. And then you can also send stuff in the Discord as well. It's always Discord's always a great place to go to like dump in files or run polls or get involved as well. And you can find the link to the Discord in the video description, I hope. If not, let me actually go ahead and do that as well. I'll go ahead and pull up my Discord. And I'll put the link in the chat as well for people who want to go there while I'm playing the rest of this video out.
Which means they can send you to whatever websites they want to send you to and censor or suppress the websites or the opinions or the political figures that they don't like.
And they work alongside ADL to do that.
They work with the ADL. That they do. In fact, more than that, though, Google shares billions of dollars of contracts with the Israeli Mossad and the Israeli government.
You're saying all 5 of the biggest conglomerates are all ran by Zionists? Because I did that myself. I remember one day I went down the rabbit hole of looking down the conservative media, and I saw it was all ran by Jewish Zionists, not just Jewish people. It was all Jewish Zionists.
And we're not allowed to notice this, right? And I don't think that's racist or anti-Semitic.
No.
Hopefully that was an AI song and I didn't just get copyrighted by that. Julie said, is there anywhere else that we can support you? Is there? On X you can. I think on X there's like a tip system on X, I believe. I don't know if you follow me on X, Kukla, or if you even have an X. But once again, I appreciate it very much, and don't feel obligated by any means or any regard. My X account is actually in the description on this video if you wanted to. But I appreciate it, and don't go out of your way. If it's too hard to do, please do not feel obligated to do by any means at all. Because I know YouTube does not like me, especially because it was blocking Titan from commenting earlier as well. And we're not the safest channel here either. So maybe in the near future, I'll probably only be streaming to Twitter or Rumble, etc., etc. But again, this is in the same light as a lot of things we bring up on this show too, regarding the specific question and the control. Obviously David Duke has his opinions on who it is specifically, and we know I've seen evidence that speaks to exactly what David Duke said as well. But it's easy to kind of downtrod on David Duke, who takes a more, non-multicultural stance. He's someone who's very, very, his race pro. And in that line of thinking, it makes you a very easy target to kind of bop out and be like, hey, your opinions aren't good here anymore because you're racist. And then boom, that's all most people need to see. And they go, hey, I'll never listen to this guy again. That's where, same things they've done to like Nick Fuentes, Jared Taylor, so on and so forth. And so when they do say things or have anything maybe even halfway decent to say of any kind of ideals, it's never heard because people, they just get that kind of preamble of who they are and they go, hey, I'm done listening to your opinion now. But yeah, X is probably the only other way, and it's like the tip button. There's like a money button there. I've never used it though. So if you can't get YouTube super chats to work, trust me, it's totally fine. I appreciate the effort though. And in the same light though, I actually saw this extremely base thing. Let me find this here. Let me back on all these. This is from Father Calvin Robinson, who I have no idea who he is. But after seeing this video, I was like, this is pretty cool. Also, he has like 400,000 followers. He seems to be a massive person for me to not know who he is. Because normally when you have that many followers, like especially me being in this space, I've probably heard of you before. But he's somebody who I've not heard of before. So it caught me off guard, especially the title. And this is a recent topic that even my dad and I spoke about, not too long ago. I think it was a few days ago when he came over to visit my daughter who was just born. We talked at length about some of these ideas, right? And this changing of values, right? This kind of like what this word has done to alter the meaning of what these things are, their actual opposement. This is what got me in trouble with on World's channel. We had Justin Reloaded, which is like his mentor and his like group, and he came in and he was like, "Be careful." And it was, I was going a little bit too far for what they would like to, to be on a lot safer channel, which is why I say, I go full my honest opinion here. I'm a bit safer when I'm on jar openers. But let's go ahead and take a listen to this. 3.5 minutes long. And again, I didn't vet this one either. I just saw the title and we're going to listen to it and react to it together in real time. And if anything's wrong with the volume, please let me know. I'm trying to keep it at the halfway point.
I put out a tweet this morning that mentioned the J word, and I try never to mention the J word because you get it from both sides. You get the right wing saying you need to become an anti-Semite. You get the left wing saying you are an anti-Semite. You get the right wing saying you're a Zionist. You get the left wing saying you need to become a Zionist or whatever. I don't care whichever faction it is. But my stance is that I'm a Christian and I put Christ first. So I ask the question, where the hell did Judeo-Christian values come from? What does this term mean? I know what Christian values are. They're what built the West. What are Judeo-Christian values? And the kickback I got from that is ridiculous. I'm not saying that people should hate Jews. I'm not saying that. I'm asking a simple question. Why do we put Judeo before Christian? Why do we put anything before Christian? I don't believe in putting anything before Christ. I think he told us that the only way to the Father is through the Son. And therefore, if we love people, including Jews, if we love everybody, we want them all to come to know our Lord because he is the only way to get into heaven. That's the Christian message. Modern day Jews don't get a special out clause from that. And I've seen there's a growing movement particularly amongst American evangelicals, where there's almost an idolatry of modern day Judaism that is put on a pedestal above everything else, sometimes even including Christianity. It's weird. I don't understand it. So I'm trying to understand it, which is why I'm asking questions. No hate intended at all. No anti-Semitism, certainly no Zionism, neither side. I'm just trying to find out, why do we put something before Christian values? People keep replying, because of the Old Testament. I'm like, what do you mean because of the Old Testament? Well, because Christianity takes on the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. Well, yes, because the New Testament fulfills the Old Testament. But we don't, and people say, well, yeah, you need to be reminded of the inclusion of the Old Testament because Christ was a Jew. It's like, yeah, yes, he was of the time. But the point is that he came to fulfill the law, and that the law has been fulfilled. The New Testament fulfills the Old Testament. And we don't need to say, read your Bible, read your Old Testament / New Testament Bible. Like, we just say the Bible, it's all included. And it's like Christ fulfilled the Old Testament, therefore freed us of that. We are not Jews, essentially. We are Christians. We follow Christ. And that's important.
Sorry, I was muted a little bit. And this was like lost in translation, right? And I'm glad that he started off this whole thing with saying, like, you get it from both sides. Because even halfway attempting to entertain this idea, this question, dive any deeper into it, you will be called an anti-Semite. You'll get smeared, defamed. It's one of the number one things that will get you taken off of platforms. Candace Owens was recently banned from like 2 different countries, like New Zealand and somewhere else, for anti-Semitism, just by kind of exploring these ideas and her kind of fallout with the Daily Wire. Also, I do want to say the feeling's mutual, Kukla. we appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who comes here and is willing to chat on these ideas and topics, especially from somebody like me who's rather new to this industry. Although I've been doing this for about a year now too, so I guess I'm too new. I can't rely on that excuse much longer. I'm gonna start getting it better. But really, to make the point that a lot of what opened my eyes to this was that kind of Daily Wire fallout. And even a little bit beforehand, I'd kind of followed people like Sovereign Bra, who were quoting a lot of scripture, specifically giving like the historical context to like the temple, 70 AD, the fulfillments of Christ, seeing those kind of memes of like, the amount of times it mentions like the Jews code Christ versus how many times it mentioned the Romans code Christ. And it really kind of gave me a perception of like, I didn't realize this was as ran deep as I guess it did. And then the moment you kind of explore it to any amount of length, you find that it's one of it probably is the most toxic topic in realm of discussion that exists online. And it also ties very strongly into the post-World War II consensus, right? The everything I dislike is literally Hitler. And so you kind of pair all these ideas together and you look at things such as like who owns things like the porn industry, right? You look at like the media, corporate media ownership, banking. It does draw it does draw the idea that there needs to be some more deeper discussion on it. But again, it's left entirely untouched because it becomes just so socially unfeasible for smaller accounts to do this. And then if larger accounts do it, they become defamed and they get smeared and then ultimately lose their jobs and then fade off into obscurity. We're kind of seeing Candace Owens try to spin her way out of that kind of position by taking different kind of conspiracies down to the rabbit hole. But I think that for a lot of people, they kind of wrote her off as being someone who hates, because going against anything Israel, even without the kind of, looking at the Jewish religion itself, is a position you can't take on the right wing. And it's even existent among the left wing as well, right? Repeat the line, right? Israel's our greatest ally. And, me and Worrell kind of joke around and we say, Ben Shapiro's favorite country. At what point is Israel, our greatest ally, going to send us millions and billions of dollars to help us out when we need it? It's never going to happen. And that's not how allies work. Allies aren't somebody who you just constantly give money to and get nothing in return. But I'll let him finish it out.
Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent because it's just something that I tweeted about this morning, but I'm kind of baffled by the language that people are using. Like, the Gentiles were grafted in with the Jews, but they are now called Christians, all of them. The Gentiles and the Jews together are called Christians. Modern day Jews are not the Jews of the Bible. The Talmudic Judaism didn't exist in that time. The Jews of the time are now Christians. The Gentiles of the time are now Christians. I'm not a Jew or a Gentile. I'm a Christian. Like, that shouldn't be confusing. And people seem to think that the Israel on the geographical map that we see today is the Israel of the Bible. No, the Israel of the Bible wasn't geographical. It was the nation of Israel. It was the people. It was the community, which is now known as the church. So the church is Israel. And so people are getting confused, I think. That it's a conversation that needs to be had further. This is probably not the way to have it, but I'd like to get someone on to have a proper discussion about that at some point. But we should be able to have that conversation without accusations of anti-Semitism or Zionism. Let's move past those silly labels and get to the conversation and try to find the truth.
And more frequently, it's actually like it's referred to as like the Israelites, right? It's kind of a lot more frequently referred to as the Israelites. And everything you said there is entirely spot on, and I think one of the things you could even dive a bit deeper into is the fact that the modern version of Israel as it sits today on the geopolitical landscape, what you see on the map was a construction that was artificially kind of built following the World War II, right? And so, Dan Bilzerian makes a lot of these good points that speaks to how very few of them actually have the ancient Hebrew DNA in them, and rather the majority of them can be traced back to European heritage, because it was a place in which that was like deemed to be where should they go since they're being so oppressed and persecuted here. We should, all these different treaties, and you can find better people to go to and better sources to provide the historical, like treaties that were in line, who broke what treaty, how did this come about, the Rothschild connection, who purchased Israel from, I believe, Britain. And it does kind of beg the question of why is there such or what's the word for that? But misconception rather, that Israel is like, it's never changed. It's always been there, and the Israel that exists right now is the one that's in the Bible. It's like, and the reason being is because a lot of the Protestant Christianity in this country has failed to provide a strong foundation to what their beliefs actually are. I think this speaks more to the fact that it's way too easy to go, Jesus is my savior, and speak from the same very shallow kind of, and not to say that they're even shallow, but to not go very far in exploring all and every ounce of Christianity, but rather keep it very encircled around the idea of salvation. And, this is even a side point from like not attacking people for gluttony, or not even attacking, but rebuking people for gluttony, rebuking people for immodesty, and all these other different ideas. And Kukla says, Father Josiah Trenum and Father Peter Hears are great fonts of knowledge with their channel. I've heard of Josiah Trenum. I'll have to look up Peter Hears. What I think is cool is I'm pretty sure my father is actually listening to a bit and some pieces from Josiah Trenum. I think he's the one that does a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. They probably both do, but I'll look into Peter Hears. Thank you for pointing him out to me. And, anyone who's followed my channel for quite a bit knows I've kind of hammered this point like religiously, no pun intended, because it's so obvious to see. And I think this is, again, points back to what I said earlier in the stream, which is, this is why I can no longer do the apologetics for Protestantism. Rather that I feel like maybe, saying it's heretical goes a bit too far, and who am I to say that? But it just feels that it's not doing what its mission should be, and rather like, you could even add a big chapter in the back of in the New Testament of, if we could get Paul to write a letter to the churches of America, and, it'd be the Americans or whatever, Americans, verse 1, chapter 3 or something like that. Like, you could go ham on just the falls and the wrongdoings and the misconceptions that are played out by the churches that are in America. And that's even, and that's layers deep. This goes to things like, why are there rainbow flags that honor homosexuality? Why are we trying to push for female pastors and female leaders in the church, and so many things that have been just flipped on their heads and have become the complete opposites of what was taught in the first place. But all of it goes hand in hand too with very deeper, very political ideals, such as the nation of Israel and this kind of Judeo-Christian misconception too. So there's so many different layers to it, and the more that you explore it, the more you will like, if you're like me, the more you'll probably become radical, as you kind of have to look these ideas in their face and realize, how much have you been lied to? And I think if anyone's even witnessed the last 4 years and how information has been played out, it's a war, the propaganda that exists, you've put yourself in a spot where you're like, how much of history can I trust now? Because if we watch the last 4 or 8 years of the media doing as much as they possibly could to lie and install things like, critical theory into the DOE and things of that nature, you would go, so how much of this happened in the past and was successful, and how much of it's been lost in history and translation that we'll now have to struggle to go figure out and uncover and like repeal and uncover what the actual truth is. And so I think you look at what's been done in recent times, it's hard to not look in the past and go, so what else is wrong? The same way that when a leftist first sees that they've been lied to by Rachel Maddow on some great degree, they think, what else have they said about Trump that's wrong? I think you can apply the same thing to literally probably everything as you understand it right now, when it regards the modern state of the liberal world order and what that entails. And so a few other things I wanted to point out. Some of these are a bit more esoteric, but I am running out of time because I gotta get off and make sure I'm getting work done. Let's see. This is one that's a bit easier to talk about too. This is from the leading report. This is that from the leading report, there's been a 15,000 or 1,500%, 14% surge in Americans looking to move abroad after Trump's election victory, per the New York Post. I think I think a lot of that may just be illegals and those who aren't meant to be here looking for a way out without having to deal with being deported physically and most likely not comfortably. I think a lot of this could also be, and not a big percentage by any means, but how many of this is people who are like involved with like possibly the Jeffrey Epstein list and what occurred with that. How many of this could be involved with the Diddy list? And those who follow that, and Ian Carroll, would know that those things are pretty linked together. And then again, how much of this is just BS? It's just people kind of talking the talk but aren't walking the walk. They just kind of say that thing just to appease people who they follow. And like, yeah, I'm gonna leave. I'm leaving America. I'm going to Canada. And it's like, anyone with 2 cents of a brain knows there's, even as bad as it is here in America, there's very few places, if any, that you could go to and experience the same quality of life and the same liberties and freedoms that you currently possess here. But again, I think it could be that higher percentage just because I think there may be a realistic percentage of individuals who know that they're going to be deported because they weren't meant to be here in the first place. And thus they say, yeah, I'm leaving before Trump gets in, or at least getting out for a while. And then one of the other ones I wanted to point to too, in line with what we just talked about before this one was, and again, these are a little bit smaller news pieces. Interesting. Looks like this one was deleted. Oh yeah, sorry, that post was deleted. Okay, so maybe that was incorrect, or they had an update on that one, so I'll skip that one. I won't even say the headline because I'm not sure. But this is the last one that I was going to point to before I jumped off here. This is that, again, from the leading report, that Joe Rogan says he declined Zelensky after the Ukrainian president expressed interest in appearing on his podcast. Part of me would be like, yeah, base Rogan, don't let Zelensky go on there. But part of me is also like, maybe you should let Zelensky go on there and just kind of poke holes on him. But, maybe that's not a mantle that Joe Rogan is willing to take up. And, I think it's a funny picture of him too. Especially because, like, what if me causing questions or asking too many questions with this president causes this guy to do something stupid? And then you would feel like you had maybe blood on your hands by, pissing off Zelensky. And then he goes home and he's like, all right, bomb these people then. We'll show them. And, how dare these Americans laugh at me? That's some of the first places my thoughts go to when I saw that. But it's kind of crazy, I think, when you look at the big picture, that is Joe Rogan's, podcast the most influential thing in America? I think the answer is probably yes. I think people hold it in like this kind of regard that they know it's not as unbiased as you possibly can be. I do think Joe Rogan has his biases, obviously, everybody does. But I think that the majority of the people have that perception of this being a unbiased medium. So those who are in the highest seats of power, those who are in the know, those who are the celebrities, when they have something they think of value that should be shared, that maybe has a bad rap previously, want to go there and take advantage of that platform to get maybe the most eyes and media possible on it. I'm not sure what his ratings are specifically, but I think it's probably pretty rare that anybody competes with Joe Rogan. And with that being said, I think I'll go ahead and wind things down here. Some final thoughts is that I was never a groyper. I was always a groyper adjacent, just because I was very honed in on Israel and the Zionist occupation, as I would say. But I think on social issues, when it comes to family building and such, I think that's probably a weak point from Nick Fuentes. I think you can't play the comedian and the serious guy at the same time. One, it kind of gives you this defensive, like, oh, I was joking. Oh, not me. Oh, I was joking about that. So even if you were wrong on something or kind of like debated against, you can kind of fall back on your sword and say, hey, no, I was just kidding, man. But with that being said, Harrison Smith also did kind of shine a light on the fact that there probably is a bit more of this kind of beta cuckery going on with the wife guys, as they say, that does need to be dismantled. And I don't disagree with the point that feminism as it sits now needs to be entirely uprooted. And I don't think people are ready for the pain it's going to cause or the amount of masculinity required to do such things. And again, I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that most women don't know how feminist they are. You can see this exhibited when Andrew Wilson debates conservative girls on the Whatever podcast all the time, and almost immediately goes to tone policing. And let's see, what else did we cover? AOC. I do find AOC to be probably the front runner, leading into it. Maybe not over Kamala, but I see her to be a front runner. If anything, the number 2 to Kamala Harris. But if you were asking me by that time period, I would imagine AOC to have the lead over Kamala. I think she's more likable, and I think the donors also view AOC as a more viable candidate, who can be used as a Trojan horse or whatever they want to install their progressive ideals. And with that being said, man, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover, and just to shore up some of the thoughts that I had earlier from previously. One thing I didn't touch on because I don't remember out of time, forgive me, is James Lindsay is retarded. James Lindsay, I cannot stand. I would actually engage with him more, but he blocked me a long time ago because I just said something that disagreed with him. And I think the reason why I find it to be so irritating is because I am very, very, very tired of the individuals who are very libertarian bent, who want to bring back 2012 liberalism. People like Seth Dillon as well, Ashley St. Clair, Josie the Redheaded Libertarian. There's a few others that are pretty prominent. I want them to get out of the Republican Party, go libertarians. I should say God, no, not can't. I just saw that. Because I think that it's time for the Republican Party to be reshaped into something a lot more Christian, a lot more truly conservative. And I will support and be behind anybody who can bring that message about, especially in regards to things like abortion, abolition, and a lot more of these socially degenerate issues that we face currently in our society right now. But with that being said, I appreciate everybody for being here. Thank you, everybody, for following along and being a part of the show. I appreciate it a lot. My chatters, I appreciate you greatly. You help keep me going. You help keep me stimulated and provide thoughtful. And you always provide me with advice and things, too, because obviously I can't see everything as well. And Titan, Kukla, I know I had the noticer in here, too. I think he follows me on X. He does follow me on X. I follow him, too. And a few others. But thanks, everybody, for being here. And Christ is King. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. And expect me to do a lot more streams in the future. And hopefully we can write and course correct as much as possible. So with that being said, have a good night, everybody, and I'll see y'all soon.